Overall, what do you worry about the most? Is it Donald Trump with an American first, agenda which could scupper trade, or do you worry about the next recession that would hurt trade even more?
Both, and a bunch of other things as well. So there is plenty of things to be worried about. I think when we came here last year, our major concern, and every interview I gave, everybody I talked to, the concern was a trade war. Were we entering a trade war? I think we are 1 year later, we're not quite there. But there are risks, and I think we have to be careful and attentive.
What would a trade war look like in 2018? We did see President Trump talking about tariffs for solar panels, for washing machines. Would it be something turning ugly between China and the U.S.?
I think what would prompt and characterize a trade war today would be throwing out the rules book, taking matters into your hands and believing that you can fix everything by the power of your economy, whichever economy that is, and there are pretty powerful economies out there. So, because if you do that, you know how you start this, but the others will respond, and you get into a domino effect that is very difficult to control and reverse.
You are an electrical engineer from Brazil. You understand dynamics cold. Are we towards Trichet's brutal moves in foreign exchange? And the backdrop of that is Brazil's leadership over a decade ago to say we don't want currency wars. You people led in the discussion on currency wars. Are we now to brutal moves in foreign exchange?
I think currency is a very tough situation and difficult issue because...
Did Secretary Mnuchin make it more difficult yesterday?
Well, I think you cannot talk currencies into a certain level. Currencies respond to a bunch of other elements, in real concrete elements in the market. I think if we are rational and we try to avoid a situation where we try to manipulate it by words or by actions, the level of currencies, we will be in dangerous territory, I think.
Well, go ahead, Francine.
No, but do you think that this could be the beginning of it?
I think it's very difficult to avoid, the desire of countries to have certain currency levels. But currencies, they do not set themselves up in the market. It depends on what others do as well. You don't have full control of currencies.
Our fault, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody in the Valley, we look at dollar euro, we look at dollar yen, we look at sterling dollar. What does Mr. Mnuchin's comments mean for the members of the WTO that we're not focused on, including the commodity nations? That was a profound headline yesterday, and what does it mean for the members of your organization?
Well, I think the first thing is to ask him exactly what he meant by that,
we're doing that.
And how he intends to follow up. Like I said, you cannot talk currencies into a certain level. I think currencies cannot be an instrument of added competitiveness. I think currencies have to respond to the fundamentals of the economy.
We should mention this. Francine, go ahead.
Yeah, well, we're just looking at live pictures, Director General, of, I believe, a helicopter landing in Davos, and we understand that is the helicopter of the President of the United States. So President Trump just landing in Davos. Also, for our radio listeners, especially in London, it's a helicopter, quite a large helicopter landing in the snow. I wanted to remind everyone, Tom, that the last time the U.S. imposed tariffs under Section 201, that was back in 1974, and the WTO rejected them and authorized members to retaliate. So something to keep in mind as the president arrives in Davos.
For those of you on radio, it is a snow-swept field. It really has a sense of Switzerland to it with a single helicopter landing. You've got to believe there's a little more coverage than that. And as we are here with the representative, Roberto Azevedo of the World Trade Organization, I believe that's not Marine One. That's the other helicopter the president has called Unilateral. I mean, this is the unilateral president. And if we're lucky, we're going to go bilateral, and we're not going to spell bloc B-L-O-C. How do we get back to the collegiality and the perceived benefits of a multilateral regime?
I hope this is a learning curve that we have to go through. It's difficult to dissociate rhetoric from actions, but we have to. It's one thing what you say, what you intend to do, what you would like to do. It's a completely different thing what can be done, what should be done, and what is done in fact. And I have seen a number of actions recently that don't necessarily lead us in the path of rampant protectionism.
Okay, but I was talking about 1974, right? At the time, the WTO said, look, that's a unilateral, a unilateral tariff. Other members can retaliate. Why would this time be any different?
No, they can, but there is a process. They have to litigate, they have to bring it to the WTO courts, they have to come to an outcome which is authorized by the organization. That's a different story altogether.
I want to bring this up. This is so important. From January 29 of 2000, when the WTO reigned supreme, William Jefferson Clinton, those who believe globalization is only about market economics, however, are wrong. This goes to the WTO. What will happen to a Bangladeshi textile worker or a migrant from the Mexican countryside without the prospect of jobs and industry that can sell to foreign as well as domestic consumers? That was one president a world ago. Does this president care about the Bangladeshis and the Mexicans within the World Trade Organization?
I think one of the big questions we have, one of the big debates that we have in the WTO is that you don't want trade to be a race to the bottom in terms of labor standards or environmental standards. It's a big conversation, but it's also probably one of the toughest conversations we can ever have, because you can imagine how that would play out for the Bangladeshi government and for the Mexican government and all the other governments. This is a conversation we haven't had, certainly since Seattle in 2000 when that came about, and today. And this is something that I think maybe it's time to have a conversation about that again.
Director, what is the significance of China's market economy dispute with the EU and the US? How big can this get?
I think people have been characterizing that as a market economy dispute. I have reservations about that. I'm not sure that that's exactly what it is about. It is about how you can apply the methodologies to calculate anti-dumping margins. Yep. So I don't want to get very technical here, but that's what the case is. I don't think we should overemphasize the outcomes.
What is your response to a given nation saying those washing machines have to be more expensive than our washing machines? That's what we witnessed last week, didn't we?
Well, that's the basic rules of anti-dumping and the safeguards. Those are the basic rules of the organization. They were negotiated, and they have been there since the GATT in 1947. This is not new. What is clearly problematic is the coincidence of those measures with a rhetoric that gives a certain message. I think that combination is what's, if you had a different rhetoric, those measures would go, people would think it's business as usual and nothing much would happen.
I want to say, Francine, I hear helicopters in the distance, and somehow I don't think even the President of the United States got here this quickly. We'll have to see. Maybe our cameras can pick that up as well here.
No, I think the President, I believe the President is in Davos, so maybe his entourage and, members of the cabinet are in the air.
Do you think he'll take the World Economic Forum shuttle?
I can tell you for free, I don't think he will be sharing
Excuse me,
a
Ms.
little
Trump,
cab.
You'll have to wait for the next shuttle.
When you look at Brexit, and if the split between the UK and the EU happens as expected, does it weaken the EU's position to negotiate trade within the WTO?
I think the EU will always be a big player in the WTO, with or without the UK. Of course, the bigger the player, the heavier the hand, the easier it is to move people around and to get people around certain issues. But it was a decision that was taken. I think that now is a given. It's about how to make sure that this happens with the least disturbance possible and without causing damage to the global economy even more.